Light back on. We're going to have to put you on roller skates so you don't have to. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Never. Never. So tonight we're looking at the soldiers. I think AJ had some really good thoughts on the soldiers. Anything, we're going to talk about a lot of that. Is there anything you want to say right now? Anything that comes to your mind? Anything that jumped out at you? Or you just want to move forward? Move forward. Okay. So we're going to talk about we're going to start with the biblical foundations for tonight's conversation. I'm going to read to you a couple of passages from Matthew, one from Mark, and one from Luke. First one is Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, appealing to him and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress." And he said to him, "I will come and cure him." The centurion answered, "Lord, I'm not worthy to have you under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to the other one, 'Come,' and he comes, and my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard him, he was amazed and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion, Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. Then we'll also be looking at Matthew from chapter 27, verse 54. Those aren't on that list I gave you. That's for discussion later. Now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly this man was God's Son." And from Mark chapter 15. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's Son." And from the Gospel according to Luke chapter 23. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." So this is what we're looking at. Those were the foundations for much of what we'll be looking at tonight. We're going to be digging into some of those a little deeper and a few other scriptures as well. I admit, for those that have been here, I've been trying to put a related image up on the screen. There were not a lot of images I could easily find that showed soldiers at the cross. I did find this one, and typically I ask you your thoughts and opinions. It's pretty straightforward here. But does anything jump out at you? Any comment you want to make? It's not like a really deep, great painting, so. Right. Well, I have one when we're talking about the centurion that's more at the centurion at the cross. I don't know if you can visually differentiate. Right. Yeah. That looks like what? They just all look angry, don't they? Yeah. I'm sorry, what? Yeah. That's what I was thinking, kind of like, you see the Secret Service, they're watching everybody. Yeah. Let's begin our time together in a spirit of prayer. I'd like you to read with me the prayer that will be up on the screen. Holy God, strengthen us to stand in our minds and hearts before the cross of Jesus, that we may learn to respond to all who suffer with greater compassion and righteousness. Amen. So the Roman soldiers at the cross of Jesus. Now, this is where I printed out the scriptures that I'm going to read from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the reason I did that is because we're going to have 3 questions that after we're done, I'd like to have you reflect upon. And so I thought as you're listening, if you want to, I'm going to put the questions up here briefly, and as you're listening, and you might think of something that you want to underline or make a note of. So here are the 3 questions that we're going to kind of talk about once I've read this scripture. How was the soldiers' treatment of Simon of Cyrene, which we hear about in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, a display of Roman power? And the second question is, the soldiers throw dice for Jesus' clothes, and it's a reference to Psalm 22, verse 18, which says, they divide my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. And so what does the soldiers' gambling reveal about their attitude toward the task? And the third question is, where today do you see the insensitivity of the powerful and privileged toward those who suffer and die? So here are these readings, starting with the gospel according to Matthew. And again, some of these you're going to hear more than once, or at least portions of them. That's to kind of just set it in your mind here a bit. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. From the Gospel according to Mark. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. From the Gospel according to Luke. And they led him away. They seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." And from the Gospel according to John. It doesn't talk about Simon. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says. They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. And that is what the soldiers did. So going back, Steve, to question 1, which I think was on the second page of that, of the Roman soldiers at Jesus' cross. Yeah. So how do you see the soldiers' treatment of Simon of Cyrene in Matthew, Mark, and Luke? A display of Roman power. Just making his way home. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mark that, but I know she talks about Simon of Cyrene. Yeah, he was just a guy, and they just took over. They compelled a passerby. They just said, "Yo, you're coming with us." They did display their power. I mean, when people in authority tell you to do something, most of us go, "Okay." And then the second question, we heard that the soldiers threw dice for Jesus' clothes, and it was a reference to Psalm 22 in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The reference was to this passage from Psalm, "They divide my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." So the question on the next screen, what does the soldiers' gambling reveal about their attitude toward the task? They were there for a task. Just another day. Yeah. Yeah. Can we get out of it? Pass the time. Yeah. Not paid much, so. Yeah, in John they did that, yeah. Was it, or did that make it worth more? I think that's because it made it worth more. I really do, because they didn't have to. Yeah.
One individual could just call another individual in, and it would be assumed that they would go ahead and do whatever they were told. And this is sort of, I'm trying to think of the word for it. What is it? What's the word for it when you're kind of like a commonplace thing going on? It's like it was no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the system was set up so that crucifixion and casting lots probably was no big deal.
Yeah, crucifixion and casting lots. Yeah, just another day.
But then that speaks to the,
Yeah, there are hundreds. Yep. Yep.
and that speaks to the system more
Right.
probably than the individual. I think that kind of carries true to a lot of different things.
It does.
Privilege comes, a lot of times systems,
Mhm.
and that's probably where the challenge needs to occur is with the systems.
Privilege and power comes more from systems. I'm just repeating it for others that can. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was just reading an article tonight, just not going to go into a lot of detail, but it's one of those things like when you look up something, and at least when I used to use the encyclopedia, and it'd be like, oh, I want to, or a dictionary. Oh, look there. Oh, look at that. Well, the internet can do the same thing to you. And I was reading an article about this amazing transformation of this very old, very famous hotel in downtown Des Moines. Got me to thinking about its previous owner, whom I knew, and I, looked that up and found out that his brother had been arrested for, trying to murder him and his son. It was just crazy. But there was privilege. They had a lot of money and a lot of privilege. Not that they all flaunted it, but the brother wanted it, Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we can't really pick on the soldiers because it was probably very standard. This is the snapshot that we see. This is the snapshot that we see. It's just like, all of the hundreds that were probably crucified that day. This is what we see. But it is the system, you're right. And then our last question, well, we kind of just said that. Where today do you see the insensitivity of the powerful and privileged toward those who suffer and die, even if those powerful and privileged, or maybe because they may have placed that person? Because we are privileged right here. We don't have to be super uber wealthy. You're right. Yeah. It does. It does. But they're still at it. That's what gives my heart. I mean, no, none of us thought it would last that long. They are. And they even took something back a little bit in Maripol, wasn't it? Where they took a port back or something.
I loved how Amy referred to some of the old movies that I watched when I was a kid, and how she was relating her understanding of this whole story, and how it was, Hollywood. I saw Quo Vadis. I saw the robe is a story about the soldier who ends up with that tunic. It's called the robe, and it changes his life. And they even had a sequel to that story called Demetrius and the Gladiators, because the guy that got the robe became a Christian, he and his wife, and they were executed because they wouldn't change, they wouldn't denounce
I didn't know
Christianity. Richard Burton and Gene Simmons. It was a fantastic movie. I loved it. But Amy refers to these old Hollywoodized versions of the crucifixion and the story of Christ, and I was shaped by that, and so for me it was when she was talking about that, I immediately was connected to her, because I went through similar thoughts, and I just thought it was cool that she was referring to those movies, and I went, man, I saw those.
Yeah. That was in the book. It wasn't.
Yeah. In the book.
Yeah. I'm just saying for those that are going, I didn't see that. Yeah. She is.
And when you consider
Yeah, she is Jewish, yeah.
You know, she just, like Vicki said, she's a storyteller, and you forget that she really doesn't believe, I guess anyway, that Christ is the Son of God.
Well, I think I don't want to speak for her theology, but she believes in Jesus. She believes that Jesus is a son of God, as we all are children of God. I don't know how much further that goes. But she has a tremendous amount of respect and knows how hard his teaching, how valuable his teachings are. But I can't say at what level, I can't speak for her on that, but. Right. That's, yeah, that's my point. I don't know. And honestly, as much as I learned from her, it's okay. It's okay. So, it's interesting because going on to the next screen, introducing the Centurions, you were absolutely right, Roger, when you talked about how do we know about the Centurions? We know about them from maybe Sunday school, from Bible reading, from movies and television and those things. So I wanted to read to you some thoughts that AJ offers on the Centurions. The first screen, Centurions were Roman army officers who commanded centuries. Now she writes about this, and she says that Centurions are Roman army officers, some who rose through the ranks rather than received a commission. The name comes into Latin from the Greek, and I can't even begin to pronounce it, but it means 100. But the centurion headed what they called a century, which we would think that would be 100 soldiers, but it was actually only 80. And then the next screen, Centurions were expected to be natural leaders who were elected by tribunes, which were military officials in the Roman Republic. And she said that they were to be headstrong, not inclined to attack, but ready to protect their posts at all costs. And then they were also expected to be usually literate, well paid, and a number of them gained Roman citizenship, which earned them certain rights. And one of the things I love, leave it right there, one of the things I love that she wrote is that, to put it in modern terms, the centurion is someone for whom you would quickly accept when a friend set you up on a date. So at the time of Jesus, there were no Roman soldiers stationed in Galilee. The centurion that we hear about in Capernaum, which is in Galilee, may have been a member of one of Herod's auxiliary forces, which were usually comprised of Cyreneans. But it was only after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE that Rome stationed a legion in Judea. So it's interesting that there were no soldiers, Rome stationed no soldiers in Galilee during Jesus' day. So those are the centurions. That introduces you to the centurions. But as she pointed out, we heard about the centurions prior to this. So if we go to the next screen, talking about how Jesus healed a centurion servant. Now, I will admit, when I read through from the New Revised Standard Version, which I read to you earlier, about the story of the centurion, I felt like I was missing something. I've read it before, but I'd really tried to read it and study it. And then I read it in the Message, and like bulbs went off. Suddenly it made sense even more. So I'm going to read to you now the same story about the centurion servant. I'm going to read to you from Matthew, from the Message. As Jesus entered the village of Capernaum, a Roman captain came up in a panic and said, "Master, my servant is sick. He can't walk. He's in terrible pain. And Jesus said, I'll come and heal him. Oh, no, said the captain, I don't want to put you to all that trouble. Just give the order and my servant will be fine. I'm a man who takes orders and I give orders. I tell one soldier, go, and he goes. And to another I say, come, and he comes. And to my slave I say, do this, and he does it. Taken aback, Jesus said, I've yet to come across this kind of simple trust in Israel, the very people who are supposed to know all about God and how God works. This man is the vanguard of many outsiders who will soon be coming from all directions, streaming in from the east and pouring in from the west, sitting down at God's kingdom banquet alongside Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Then those who grew up in the faith but had no faith will find themselves out in the cold, outsiders to grace, and wondering what happened. Then Jesus turned to the captain and said, go. What you believed could happen has happened. And at that moment, his servant became well. So this is an image I found of the centurion who came to Jesus. As she, in the video, AJ pointed out that the Greek word that Matthew uses for the person who is paralyzed can mean a servant, and it can mean a slave, and it can mean a child. So as you think of that, does that information change how you think about the centurion's request of Jesus? If it was a slave or a child or a servant? Roger says no. I'm sorry, what? It would change his motivation? Yeah. But does it change the way that, so does it change the way that you think of the request that the centurion gave to Jesus? Do you think that he would have been more urgent if it was a child? He knew Jesus could heal.
Jesus recognizes the most important part of the story, and that is this man who didn't really know Jesus and maybe knew something about, what the Jews had been talking about regarding Jesus, that this man believed that if he went to him with this request, he didn't have to come to his house, that he had the power to heal. And he believed that so well, and Jesus recognized that and applauded him for his faith.
So Jesus recognized that the man had faith that Jesus could fix it wherever he was. He didn't have to come to the house. I think that's what I really liked about the message when he said, oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. You don't have to come to the house, It's okay.
What's interesting is when we looked at the old miniseries, Jesus of Nazareth, the Centurion was played by Ernest Borgnine that comes to Jesus.
That photo came up when I was looking for
Yeah.
images.
and he is also then the Centurion that looks up when Jesus dies and says,
Oh, he is?
Yeah. I don't know that there, Amy even referred, we don't really know if that could have been
Right.
that person, but it certainly could have been.
So when Jesus talks about how strong this centurion's faith is and how it's greater than anything he's seen, think those people that he encountered early on in Matthew's gospel would have felt? And how does that, as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about faith and is Marlis's faith stronger than mine? The size of a mustard seed, yes. I mean, and do I think my faith is stronger than Marlis's? No, but I mean, if I did, what would that say of me? I don't think it is, but well, yeah. I mean, we all experience life differently, but you can't. It's kind of like that old "how long is a piece of string?" You can't define it. I get that, but.
And so maybe it's more of a criticism of the system,
Criticism of the system rather than the.
rather than the individual, comparing individuals.
But Jesus did say it's the greatest faith I've seen.
And then they also talked about how the Jewish people who were supposed to have that faith were the ones that didn't, with the Centurion.
Yeah. Well, but, yeah, and I don't know to whom Jesus was referring when he said, I've not seen faith like this in all of Israel that I've been walking around in. I mean, and to think that this guy was basically an outsider, I mean, wow. And kind of the enemy, exactly. This man this man is leading many outsiders who will soon be coming from all directions. Yeah. Then those who grew up in the faith but have no faith will find themselves in the cold, outsiders to grace, and wondering what happened. So when you hear that inside, outside, can you correlate any of that with the those that were at the crucifixion? Well, I mean, at the crucifixion, you had insiders and outsiders, in essence. You had those that stayed, you had those that fled. You had the beloved disciple, you had, the women weeping, and then you had the soldiers over here casting lots and gambling away. I mean, I'm just asking. AJ asked, I thought it was a good question. It was a valid question. Can we, when Jesus is talking to the centurion about how those that think they have faith are going to find out, wait a minute, what happened? I don't know. And I relate that faith to power. I mean, I'm not saying having faith gives us power, but I'm just thinking of the insiders, the outsiders, those with power, those without power, those with faith, those without faith. It's just to me, it's a constant back and forth. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right. Eliminating the idea of insiders and outsiders, I agree, but I'm just saying at the crucifixion, when do we see that? You don't have to say yes if you don't think so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but you raised the question think, would the priests and scribes have been there because of their thing about not being near dead people? And, when she raised that question, I thought, I'm guessing they had to be there because they had to go to Rome. They couldn't execute Jesus on their own. They had to go to Rome to get the execution done. But they were responsible for it. They're the ones that charged him. And my guess is Pilate said, you're going to be there. You're the ones that started this, so you're going to witness it. And to me, that's how I would have, why the scribes and priests were there, because they were probably forced to be there.
Probably. So let's look at that centurion that we hear about at the end. The one who is actually at the next screen, the one who is actually at the crucifixion, and his declaration. In her book, I liked what AJ wrote about it. She writes, we can now, because we've learned all this about centurions, we can now appreciate more fully the centurion at the cross. I imagine him to be a man of intelligence, literate, politically savvy, probably not happy with being on execution detail. I do wonder if the soldiers who executed Jesus were not officers, which is what John's gospel suggests, she writes. Can you show that picture of the centurion? Yeah. Perhaps he was even interested in Jews and Judaism. We don't know if he'd heard of Jesus, but he did read the inscription on the cross, King of the Jews. Perhaps he pitied Jesus. Perhaps he thought this is what happens when you gain a following in Jerusalem at a festival. Perhaps he was sympathetic to the Jews who chafed under Roman domination. Watching Jesus die, he states, according to Mark's Greek text, truly this man a son of God was. The NRSV offers the more I don't know how do you say that? Mellifluous? I didn't look that one up. I read it, but I didn't. Truly this man was God's son. But the footnote offers the more accurate alternative. Truly this man was a son of God. We can understand this statement in multiple ways. So what do you think? What do you think that he's doing? Is he being, when he says surely this man is the Son of God, is he being facetious? Is he being flippant? Is he being glib? Does he see Jesus not as the Son of God, but as a Son of God, a child of a divine parent and a human one? Or does the centurion's declaration affirm what the gospel writer has been saying all along? Jesus' primary role is not to be seen in miracles. Remember how frequently Jesus tells the people he healed to be quiet about what he had done for them. The mission, be killed and after 3 days rise again, is to be the focus. To focus on the miracles is to miss the point. And the centurion, who is focusing on the cross, gets the point. The disciples who are unable to accept the teaching of the cross are nowhere to be found. But the centurion gets it. So we've talked about centurions, we've talked about who they are, we've talked about how they respond, we've reflected on the righteous, we've reflected upon the self-righteous risk, and through Scripture we have been reminded that sometimes completely innocent ones are executed. So how do we as a people of faith, how do we respond to the power structures? When I heard about the tornado that ripped through New Orleans, I went right back to what was the hurricane that several years ago, Katrina, and how many people, mostly people of color, but a lot that were just poor, could not leave. I was talking to someone after that who said, well, I would have walked. And I said, but where to? You have no place to go. I remember how they were in that horrific bowl of whatever that stadium was. Just, I mean, how do we fix that? I mean, and that's just this country. Certainly there's issues all around. I mean, Beth has, during the one great hour of sharing, she's shown us pictures. But do we just, like the soldiers that cast lots, think this is the way it is and this is the way we do it, and we just keep doing it because this is the way it's always been done? This is the way we've always done it. Yeah, that'd be fine. Or do we stand before the cross and say, wow, there's more we need to do? Bonnie. George Floyd. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how we have peaceful protests, and how we, got things done, and the person was held accountable.
Yes.
And things are changing, and this poor woman that's being put through the mill on the
Yes.
on the Supreme Court justice, but she'll make it.
I think she'll survive that.
It's
Yeah.
diversity, and we're making a difference. We're doing it the right way. It just takes time.
It does take time. No, I agree. We've taken great strides there, there was a quote I heard somebody say several years ago. We're better than we were. We're not where we used to be, and we're not where we're going to be, but we're getting there. And I think and that's absolutely right. My fear, and even with Ukraine, I don't want us to become complacent. I don't want us to say, well, look, there's another video. Okay, good. We have to remain vigilant, whatever the issue, whatever. We can't do them all. We can't do them all. Each one of us has to pick one or two that speak to us. Right now, my whole thing is World Central Kitchen, and I'm sure y'all, if you have Facebook, you're probably tired of seeing me post and stuff. I don't post half of what I could, but that's what speaks to me right now. And racial. And LGBTQ. That's what speaks to me. But everybody has to decide when we're going to stand in front of that cross and say, I get it. I get it, Jesus. This is what you're telling me I need to do. And everybody has to make their own decisions. Because we can't fix it all. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Bonnie. That was good.
In all relationships and in all systems, how am I using my power and privilege? Sometimes wonder, why were we born in the United States and not somewhere else? I mean, really been,
And-
in our family,
Mhm.
all those kind of things.
Mhm.
Are the power and privilege.
Treat people like I would be wanted to be treated like. So, I mean, if I see someone at the store that needs help, I'll go and open a door or go help them or do something. I mean, I'm just not that type of person to see someone and not go.
No, you're not.
I can estimate how powerful
That's
that
very
is.
powerful.
And
Like
I've had
those
people,
little acts of-
say things back, and I'm like, it's fine, it's good, I'm glad to do it, let me help you put these groceries in the car,
We talked a little bit about that a week or two ago, about just those random things. And would we speak up for somebody that was getting verbally abused or
Right.
whatever at
And
a
I did
store?
that one time in Walmart in Waverly.
Was it a kid?
Yeah, his mom was, this poor kid was trying to pick out something for his dad, and she was doing nothing but berating him the whole time. He could not do nothing right, and she would say he was stupid and things.
Oh, no.
And I just stood there, and then first I walked away, and then I seen them in the checkout line, and I thought, if I get my chance, I'm going to talk to him, if I can just get a chance. So as she ended up going to the restroom as I was done checking out, and I just said, are you safe? Do you need help? Can I help you? Blah, blah, blah. And he kept saying, no, I'm fine. And I just said, you do not need to be treated like this. You should not be, talked to like this. And don't let that bring you down. I went on and on. I tell you, when I got to the car, I did nothing but cry and pray for him because I was like, Lord, what's going to happen to this child?
And you may have made a big difference.
You did.
I mean,
Oh,
you
you
know,
did.
but I mean, it's just. And again, I think you brought up to me one time. You said to me at that time, I do not know the whole story. I did not know the whole story. But I felt like.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope I didn't make you feel like you should.
No,
Okay.
But you made me
Yeah.
think like I don't
Yeah.
know what's going on for her as a mom.
Yeah.
What her situation was.
Yeah, there are probably times when my boys and I were at Walmart that we better grab those two.
Yeah. Or maybe we should take her home and take
Yeah. It was funny last night. I was actually at Walmart, and the clerk checking out, there was a fellow in front of me who was buying something, one of those things you have to pay for it, and then it was like salt or ice or I don't know what it was. She didn't know for sure, and he just kept looking at her, and then he'd look at me. And I thought, oh, bring it on. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it that way, but I thought, if you say anything to this, because he was kind of chiding her. And he was kind of, I could feel he was going to start chiding her, because she was trying to look at the book. I think she was new. She was trying to look at the book. She got the help from the person next to her, and I was just ready. I was going to protect her, but he didn't. Oh, yeah. 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 No, I understand. I get frustrated, but I just didn't want him. Yeah, I didn't want him picking on her. Yeah. Or ask them to count back change, and they go, back in the day, I had to do that. Yeah. Oh, my friends, let's join our voices in prayer. Sovereign God, you alone have the right to make an ultimate claim on our lives. By your grace and your Spirit, lead us as those under your authority to respond to those who suffer with greater righteousness, that we may truly know ourselves as your children, merciful as you are merciful, holy as you are holy. Amen. So my friends, thank you for being here. I'm trying to honor the fact that I try to keep it to an hour. We're a little over. Next week we will hear about the beloved disciple. So I hope that you will join us. And by that time, the show will be over, and we'll have people rested up. So thank you all. Thank you at home if you're watching. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Barb.